Okay. So good morning, everyone, once again. And want to say a big welcome to those who are already here. I can see all others will be joining us as we get started. I can see our two wonderful faculties are already here. So you're all welcome. So without much ado, we are going to get started. Dr. Gbenga Adebayo is here and Professor Josephine Etowa here. You are all appreciated. Is Dr. Etowa here or Dr. Ako? I haven't seen them on the screen yet, but okay. We'll acknowledge them once we see them. So you all are familiar with some of the headwinds we have been facing, especially in the province of Saskatchewan, but we're not exactly unique with that particular issue. And we need some therapeutics. And that is why, especially in this month of February that ended yesterday, we have extended it by at least 1 day. We've decided to get some help. So look at this as not just educative, but also therapeutic. We need some help with some of the giants in the land. And we cannot but seek out some help with these two wonderful folks that we have in our midst today. So for that reason, and without much ado, we're going to get started with Dr. Gbenga Adebayo, who is one of us. He's a family physician and is based in Prince Albert. And my good friend and sister, Dr. Jo Etowa, will put, what we'll do is we'll read the intro for each of them, the bio, at the beginning of their talk. And Dr. Josephine Etowa's bio is a full textbook. So what I'll do is I'll read a short bio for her, and then I'll post the larger version in the discussion forum for us to read. I thank you. I'll pass the baton to Dr. Lakomi. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. You are welcome today. Our leader has spoken, and I think this is time for us to start. I'm going to introduce Dr. Gbenga Adebayo, who's a family physician in SK, in Prince Albert, and is also a physician advocate with Saskatchewan Medical Association. He's going to lead us in the first presentation today. And most of the things we're going to learn or talk about, if you follow what Dr. Adetola just mentioned, is therapeutic. There'll be time for question and answer. And also I will employ everyone to try to meet themselves, and so that we can have a quiet and a lovely session today. Thank you. Dr. Gbenga, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm just going to see if I can share my screen. I'm just trying to share my screen. 1 second here. But Dr. Alakomi, do you mind sharing the screen, and then maybe we can take it from there without.
I think he has to make you a co-host so you can be able to do that.
Yeah.
I think he just needs to change the share screen to multiple users so that we can both turn on our screen. Just on the green button below, just click on multiple.
Let's see. Yeah.
I've done that already.
It's working.
Is it working now?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, because try it again. Okay, thank you.
It is working.
Thank you.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much, Dr. Lakomi. And first and foremost, I really want to say a big thank you to the founders of our great association, CANPAD. I think it's a unique forum, which I find that's very helpful to bring us together, more so at a time such as this. And I also want to use this opportunity as well to thank the CANPAD executive, both at the national, provincial, and the CME levels. And more importantly, I want to say a big thank you to each and every one of us that have joined this morning and for the opportunity to share on this very important discourse. I'll say that for me, it's both a pleasure and an honor to share with us this morning. My name is Gbenga Adebayo, as earlier mentioned. I'm a family physician, and I also work with the Saskatchewan Medical Association as a physician advocate for workplace well-being, also with the University of Saskatchewan as an assistant professor. I don't have any conflict of interests here. I mean, not other than the fact that I work with the SMA. I've not received any money to do this presentation this morning. Yeah, and it's absolutely a privilege and an honor once again. I'm just going to quickly go to land acknowledgement, because this means quite a bit to me. We acknowledge that the land on which we gather and work is Treaty 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10 territories, and the homeland of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and the Métis people. We pay our respects to the traditional caretakers of this land and affirm our commitment to reconciliation, shared stewardship of the land, and our relationship with one another. We honor the First Nations, the Métis peoples' histories, cultures, and commit to working together to address the gaps and health outcomes between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. Beyond the words here, I like to personalize it, this acknowledgement with the fact that since 2012, Saskatchewan has been home to myself and my family. We continue to prosper and thrive in this land. And I believe that that's the aspiration that all of us here have. For objectives, by the end of today's session, I'm hoping that we'll be able to understand the role of advocacy in medicine, and also how to develop personal and collective resilience, strengthening professional and institutional support networks for one another. We're hoping that we'll be able to enhance leadership, policy and policy influence, and also highlight some of the sustainable change and legacy pathways for us to advance our course as a people. Now, medical practice anywhere in the world, and this is, I come from my own perspective, it's a privilege. It's a privilege, it's a noble profession, and it's also very rewarding. Having said that, it's not without its own challenges. There are challenges that we all face in the course of the profession. One of the major challenges with medical practice is stress. And when we talk about stress, we know there are different levels of stress. There are different stressors that could impact, the practice. One of which is The organizational structure in itself could impact. Talking about organizational structure, we have, when you lose your loss of autonomy, oftentimes, being told what to do, you don't have control over it. Like for third-party controls, limited resources is a huge one. And we also know that I think some of the things highlighted earlier on by Dr. Adetola, which is discrimination. I mean, call it the name it is. It is a stressful for those of us that have experienced that in one shape or form, in as much as it's not a palatable experience, not acceptable, but you would agree with me that it makes work stressful. The other part of stress that one would experience is the increasing work demands. This has always been the case, even from residency, from training, from medical school, we've been trained to, to accommodate more work. But post-COVID, we know that it's even getting, there's more demands. The work demand is getting more with long work calls, working hours. You finish at 5 o'clock. You find out that you're still working up until 9, 10 p.m. I was having a conversation with someone the other day. I said, I don't know if technology is a blessing or even a punishment for medical practice. I mean, many years ago, by the time you're done with your work, you know that you're done. But these days, with the advent of computers, you take it home, you still have tasks to do, you still have a lot of things to follow up on. And added to that is the administrative burden. All these are things, that contribute to increasing work demands. In addition, we talk about prolonged night on call periods, and the frequency of that as well. For stressful work drivers, you would think that what we've mentioned should be enough to drive or to be stressful enough. But then we still have, some personality and interpersonal challenges. For example, the extreme sense of commitment to patients, which in itself might be a good thing. But then where do you balance that with that feeling, with responsibility and having to be there all the time, feeling indispensable? How do you balance that personal ambition and growth with competitiveness, which you often find with colleagues, with one another, competing for one thing or the other? And also, we can't but talk about conflicts. Conflicts within colleagues, conflict with healthcare workers, conflict with staff, conflict with patients, conflict with family members, conflict with organizational structure, administrators. All this make work stressful. But having said that, how does stress manifest? I think it is important for us to touch base on this, talking about how stress manifests, so that we know how to identify when we're undergoing extreme work-related stress. There's a pace for, sometimes there's doubt, gainsaying one's clinical judgment. There could also be a sense of guilt, exaggerated sense of responsibility, moral injury, when there's increasing work demands, trying to balance that with your responsibility, the workload, and not being able to do everything that you think you would want to do. Then we'll talk about exhaustion, both physical, emotional, spiritual exhaustion. Feeling like, what? Is there something more in me to give? Then you can also manifest in the form of cynicism, lack of empathy, being detached, and the myriads of health issues mental health issues, specifically, ranging from anxiety, depression, substance use, substance dependence, and unfortunately, even to the point of suicide. Now, that would take me to one important topic I think we need to touch on, talking about work-related stress, which is a buzzword that, we hear it oftentimes, burnout. I know this is something that I believe many of us would have come across in one way or the other, whether you have a colleague that have experienced it, or you yourself, you've experienced it. So I think it's important for us to actually go through this and kind of understand the concept, because by understanding that we can identify, then we know when we need to ask for help and when we need to take a pause, for example, or seek for, access resources. When we talk about burnout, there are three essential components of burnout. One is the exhaustion component, which we earlier mentioned in terms of the manifestations of work-related stress, whereby there's physical, emotional, spiritual burnout, exhaustion, a feeling that, you know what, there's nothing more in me to give. The other component of burnout is the depersonalization, whereby one feels detached, there's no more empathy for the work, there's negativism, cynicism, even threats to objects. And sometimes we find out that one can be more callous, whereby, that sense of compassion that drives you initially might be lost. And the third component will be that sense of reduced personal accomplishment or competency even, whereby one begins to doubt one's capabilities, don't even believe that you can make a difference anymore. I remember before getting into medical school, the excitement and the passion, that, you feel like I'm going to change the world. I'm going to at least impact lives. And I think that's something that many of us will bring to our workplace. You wake up in the morning, what brings us joy and fulfillment in this work is the fact that you go and you're able to help somebody relieve their distress or support them through their agony or whatever. Support patients and their family through what they're going through. But unfortunately, one could get burnt out to the point that, you're even wondering, does it even make sense? Why do I even wake up and go to work? And I like us to think about this from the perspective of an emotional energy, or rather an energy bank account, whereby physically you have something to draw from, you have something that keeps you going. You have that physical energy that, you know what, you have that stamina, I can still keep going, I can do something. Then the emotional part of things, of your bank account, is that you have that compassion in you to still dole out to someone, to still want to help, to see somebody that is having, one illness or the other, or one sickness or one ailment, that you feel compelled that I have something that I can offer based on the knowledge that I have, based on my knowledge of science. I have that compassion. I can help. I understand where you're coming from. And the third part of it, which is that spiritual part of it, is that connection to your purpose. Why am I doing what I'm doing? But unfortunately, when burnout sets in, just like the matchstick in the picture here, it's like all is gone and lost. That's a state we don't want to be in. So let's think about burnout as a depletion of all of that energy that you bring to your workplace, all of that energy that keeps you going. And that's not where we want to be. Having talked about, burnout in the sense of it, in a broad spectrum, it's not something that just happens all of a sudden. There are different stages of it, which I'll just try to quickly go through. One of the first stages is that phase one, And as you can see here, you can see the energy level and the time, period. At this first phase, there's a lot of energy, there's passion, there's no symptoms. And, one might experience some day-to-day stress, which, can be a positive thing. Overall, one is doing okay. Then it goes to the second phase. Now, we can see that one could get to that slippery slope, whereby there's heightened stress, not balanced out by support or relaxation. Then one begins to experience those intermittent symptoms of burnout, intermittent symptoms of stress, like we earlier highlighted, like feeling fatigued, exhausted, maybe irritable at times or anxious. But overall, one is still in around that okay, zone. You're still doing okay. If you're being asked about overall, for the most part, one is doing well. Now, if care is not taken at this point, if there are no supports, if one is not taking a pause or checking on oneself or redirecting to re-energize, to rejuvenate, then one can slip to the phase 2, phase 2B, which is where you have increasing burnout symptoms. Now the burnout symptoms are being sustained. One continues to experience that chronic stress. And then you begin to exhibit, now you're feeling more exhausted, neglecting personal needs such as sleep, meals, or even relationships begin to suffer at this point. At this point, one might say that, occasionally feeling okay, but they are not, that is, they are normally still compassionate, okay? But at this point in time, there's burnout symptoms is sustained. I would say that this is a point in time when you recognize that you want to take a break. Take a break, do what you like, if you want to travel, or even if it's reflect on things. Now, again, it can spiral down the slope further to continue to experience full-blown symptoms now, where one is, apathy, feeling of despair, can also cause, some physical symptoms here. The red flag here I would like to just throw out there is, at this point in time, the physician tries to normalize these symptoms. Oh, I think it's just me. After all, this is the job. This is how I should. I'm just hanging in there. No. This is a point where we need to seek support of one another. This is the point where one needs to seek help. And if you're recognizing this in a colleague, this is a point where you need to draw their attention to it. It gets worse. When they still continue to, when the physician continues to experience the chronic burnout symptoms, at this point, which is the phase 3A, they begin to struggle to function. Now, this is chronic. This has been going on for a long time. At this point in time, there is an intense need for support. But unfortunately, the physician can recover and say, okay, I'm doing okay, but not. Things can get worsened. And as we can see, at a point in time, one can begin to experience all those full symptoms of major depression, having relationship issues, both at work and at home. Then some can get into substance use, to try to medicate, self-medicate, to try to take away those feelings, to try to take away those experiences or the burden that they are suffering. Unfortunately, some go ahead to commit suicide, which is one of the reasons why I think and as we can see, burnout is a slippery slope. And I will say that, and as you can see, it affects every one of us. It affects the patients. It affects the healthcare system. When you talk about burnout, it would impact the productivity of the physician. If one physician is burnt out from an already depleted workforce, you can see the pressure on the remaining, physicians that are left to look after the patients. It also impacts, patient access, increased physician turnover, increased healthcare costs. The physician, it impacts the physician and even their family. It impacts the relationships, job satisfaction, poor self-care, well-being, and you can see all the 5 pillars of healthcare can be impacted. Just speaking to the reason why it's an important topic for us to discuss. Now, be mindful of our topic, and it's not just to highlight what the problem is, but then there's an opportunity for us to refuel and to rejig things up. On that note, I'll just quickly highlight some self-care practices that one can do. And I would like us to remember the energy bank account that we talked about earlier on. There is very much need to do that periodically. Take rest, whether it's going to be short-term rest or long-term, rest or breaks. During work periods, ensure to go on breaks. I know many of us, because of the pressures of the work and all that, you want to work 8 to 5, there's no break in it, there's work demand, take breaks. And I say to some of my nursing colleagues, I said, that's something I appreciate about nursing. You are in the middle of the code, you are looking for somebody, they say, you know what, she's on break, call me. But I think we need to start doing that for one another, creating that support, tapping one. It is time for you to go on break. Also, long-term holidays. I don't know how many of us, whether planned or not planned, actually do those, take time to go on holidays. Take time with the family. These are things that have been shown to help. Don't negotiate your sleep. Exercise, recreation, connection with one another. Something like what we had this morning. I think this is a great exercise for us. Then spirituality. For some of us, mindfulness, if you do yoga, if you can pray, meditation, whatever you can do to enhance your spirituality, your purpose. I think those are important things for us to pay attention to. Now, I'm going to flip it to building resilience, which is an important topic for us, because that's one of the things that would also enhance or help us to thrive. But one thing that when we talk about resilience, we often refer to all the positive adaptations within the context of significant adversity. Now, we've talked about how stress can impact an individual, how stress can impact even the healthcare system, the culture, and patients. Now, we also often talk about the positive adaptations that would occur. But in talking about resilience, I like us to take a pause, because there are some questions that, when you think about the concept of resilience and the positive adaptations, we question what is the appropriate positive adaptations, especially for minority groups such as Black physicians, where there are already systemic biases, there's stigmatization, pathologizing, and othering. I use an example. I and a colleague, were having a conversation the other day, and somebody came, why are you guys fighting? We're not fighting, we're having a conversation. Oh, the way you guys were just, the way you were moving your hands and talking loudly, we thought there was something wrong. No, that's the way we talk. Now, understand there's a bias already. If 2 people are having a conversation and my voice is high or I'm loud, oh, he's being aggressive. I don't know how many of us get that. Okay? Now, when you talk about positive adaptations, who makes that judgment? When the person that is going to administer the resilient intervention does not even understand what the minority individual, the physician, is going through. The other question, which is who interprets these responses from a minority physician, such as a Black physician, in the face of adversity or oppression? Who determines the appropriate support? Those are questions I think we need to start asking ourselves and we need to answer as well. And I say this because resilience can mean resistance. Resilience can mean speaking up, standing up, while one is experiencing whatever stressor it is that is due to discrimination or intimidation. That is resisting bad treatments and taking ownership. That is also resilience. But then it could be misinterpreted as being antagonistic to the organization. You see, that is where we need support. And that is where we need a very much well thought through pathway to support one another. If that's not checked, then that could put the individual, the physician that is experiencing whatever stressor it is, at the mercy of the perpetrators of their stressor. Okay? And which the intervention could be suppression. You know what? You're speaking too much. You need anger management. That you need to be coached in that direction where you don't speak up. There is need for us to educate one another. There's need for us to educate even those in leadership, whereby it is not just to transform the minority individual that is experiencing stress due to a systemic factor that is not in their favor. Now, I talk about resilience, what to do. And this is an acronym, that we can take home, you have to belong to a camp. And I say that literally as well, because the first thing you have here is the connections that you have. You want to develop a sense of connection. Small group programs such as what we're having this morning, to promote community, connectedness among one another. Autonomy, the ability for one to take one's affairs into one's hands. I don't have to wait for another person to make a decision for me. I want to take ownership, whether it's related to my career or my well-being. A sense of autonomy. I also want to develop that sense of mastery. And this is where I think it's very important. I know many of us, we'll all pay attention to developing our professional skills, being wonderful physicians, great. But how about mastery in the place of our technical skills? How about mastery in the place of our soft skills, people skills? Some of us, no doubt, we'll be great physicians and all that. But people skills, where are we at with that? We want to master that. You want to purposefully engage one another and support one another. Speaking, for example, one of the things I heard about being tactful, they say being tactful is you tell somebody go to hell and they're looking forward to the trip. It's an art. It's an art. And also, talking about resilience is also that purpose. It's at this point that I like to direct each and every one of us to our source of spiritual strength, whether it's mindfulness or spirituality or prayers. It's also important. What gives you that drive? Why am I doing what I'm doing? We need to constantly remind ourselves and ensure that, at every point in time, I'm finding joy in the practice of medicine. in what I'm doing. I'm finding joy, and it is pleasant for me to continue to do what I'm doing. At this point in time, I'd just like to introduce our Saskatchewan folks to this well-being index tool very briefly. And if you've not, you can please make sure to sign up to it. It's a, it's a 100% anonymous, and this is from the SMA. It's free to all physicians here in Saskatchewan. I understand that the CMPA might be bringing it to others in other provinces. It's web-based tool whereby you evaluate multiple dimensions of distress that we've talked about. You just have to answer 7 to 8 questions. Again, it's totally anonymous. It's designed to measure burnout and provide you with valuable resources and feedback, to allow you to compare, how am I doing with my colleagues? Yeah. And I'll just, and I can leave this at the end of the day. You can scan this QR code just to log into the, just to sign up, and it's free. It's totally free, and it's totally anonymous. We'll flip to an important side of our conversation this morning, which is about advocacy. I don't know if we had so much time. I'm cognizant of our time. So and at the end of the day, I will send the QR code to our various WhatsApp forum. I'll leave it with Dr. Olakomi as well to share with each and every one of us, for those of us in Saskatchewan. We talk about advocacy. I know that, yes, it's one term that can be quite loose, in our application of it. Sometimes you hear there's advocacy here, and oftentimes it's, it's the activity whereby one is gathering, whether it's individual or, as a group, to try to influence actions or decisions or what have you. But one of the things I like to flag here is that there are dangers to advocacy, as some of us would have been able to tell. There are times in which we've tried to advocate and we've gotten our fingers burnt and we've been discouraged. And that's because the danger of advocacy is advocating blindly or poorly. Advocating not with the right mindset or the right approach can be very costly, can be costly to the extent of, one's profession, one's job, and maybe even one's life, depending on the sphere, depending on the context. I hope it never gets to, those extremes, but these are possibilities. So I would like to say that it's better to engage or negotiate in form of, if one is advocating from the place of strength, or at least understanding one's strength. And that will talk about at least one's strength and also one's weaknesses. So what I'm trying to say in essence is, before advocacy can be successful, there is a lot of work that needs to go on. And part of it is an analysis of what's happening. You need to understand it. Have you done your SWOT analysis? For example, that's a common term to many of us. What are the strengths here? What are my weaknesses? What are the opportunities? Who are my allies? Who can I reach out to? Who are the influencers? Who are the decision makers? What do I want from this? What are the threats to me? You can win a battle and lose the war. You don't want that to happen. So you want to make sure that you look critically at things. Do you want to pool resources? Do I need to call other people to this? Who do I need on my side? And in addition to maybe doing a SWOT analysis, there are a few things that one can also do. So for example, do I want to do, there's also something that we talk about, the PEST analysis, where the P is for, the political terrain. What are the policy, what's the policy that I need to influence? Who are the players here? And the E is for the economic or environmental, depending on, the context. What does this cost? For example, if you want to advocate, do you need legal? Or, depending on what you're going through, what's the economic, and what's the environmental scan? Is it the right time? Those are also things to consider. Is it the right timing? You can do the right thing at a wrong time, then it makes it wrong, right? Then the social part of things, I'm still talking about the analysis, the PEST analysis acronym. The social part, the culture, the beliefs, the values. Those are some of the things you want to consider when you're talking about, advocacy. It's not just something that you want to jump, oh, this is wrong, then you jump into it. Then one could get their fingers burned and be like, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I have a good intention, but I got my fingers burned. Then also technology is also something that you want to consider, for example, media. What do I need in all of these things? What do I need? Those technological theory. Those are some of the, analysis models that one can use when we talk about advocacy, because it's very important that when we have to advocate, whether it's for ourselves as individuals or for one another, we get it right. And still talking about that, advocacy, there's also, you've gotten your analysis right, you know what you need. There's also the framework. What is the strategy framework? Because in everything, you have to be strategic, right? And the two main things to think about, with strategy would be, what's the outcome? What do I really want to achieve from this? And who are my audience? For outcome, you want to think, is it for awareness?
Hello, Dr. Adebayo. Are you there?
I think you have only a minute to go anyway, a minute or two to go.
I think we've lost Dr. Gbenga Adebayo's Zoom link here. Maybe Dr. Adetola should just take over so that we'll move to the next presentation. I'm trying to reach him on phone.
Okay, just for a minute, I'm going to bring on Dr. Etowa in a minute. So Dr. Etowa, can you just unmute yourself? That's the current president. We'll just have you say something for 1 minute, and then I'll bring on Dr. Etowa. Dr. Etowa.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Dr. Adetola. My apologies, I'm just driving right now. Just want to thank you and the Saskatchewan leaders for organizing this meeting. And I think listening to the first speaker has really been an eye-opener, and I hope to those of us also attending the need for advocacy as well as, to look out for burnout is quite important. We've had several presentations of burnout in the past in CANPAD. But, there's always the need for us to always recognize and to know, what burnout really means and for us to take action when necessary. So I don't want to waste any further time, but thank you so much for this. I'm looking forward to the second speaker and, to learn more and for us to see how we can incorporate the thoughts, the ideas and the ideologies being said here into CANPAD advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Dr. Etowa, all the way from Edmonton in Alberta. Okay, so let me just give a 1 minute summary. Dr. Adebayo was telling us, and many of us remember Ebenezer Obi. I always have to put a Nigerian spin. There was one song, it's in Yoruba, but I'll do my best in English. It says, "Alowo ma jaye eyin lemo." I want to Laila Noda, I want to Kuwantilo. In English, the epicures and connoisseurs of yesterday are dead and gone. I don't even know whether that helped. So we all came here. Everybody knows Nigerian doctors, since this is a doctors forum, are high earning, never anything close to Elon Musk. Point is this, we work ourselves to the bones. But Dr. Adebayo said something just a few moments ago. I was in the urgent care a few days ago, and I was playing with some of the nurses, and I said, what's happening? The particular group of nurses in this area, they worked about 2 hours, and then I see some other nurses. And then all of a sudden, I see another set. After a couple of hours, they're gone. And then I see another set, and they said, oh, they're on break. We don't give ourselves that kind of break. Because I was on a 6-hour shift. I didn't even go take a bathroom break. I was on from 3 to 9, straight. We need to take breaks. We need self-care. We need self-love. We need to go away for 1 week, for 2 weeks. May God grant us wisdom. Dr. Adebayo is back. I think he has only about 2-3 minutes to round up. Is that so, Dr. Adebayo?
Hello, my apologies.
Oh, no,
I think something happened with my internet. I lost all the connections. My apologies. Anyways, I'm wrapping up here. You know, we talked quite a bit about advocacy and how to get it right. You know, I'm just going to wrap up with our commitment. And I think this is where I like to pitch my tent. I would like us to reflect and to commit, because that's the only way we can advance anything. Otherwise, we've only, spoken, they say in my village, plenty words, get blown away by the wind. I like us to commit to self-care. At this point, I like us to commit to, what am I going to do to improve my own well-being as a person, as a physician? If you're going to be dedicating time to meditate, to take breaks, and I heard Dr. Adetola, talking about that earlier on. I think that's something that is very important for each and every one of us as physicians. I like us to also commit to seek for help, ask for help. It's not out of place. When we find that we need help, let's seek resources. There are resources out there. I mean, at this point, there are lots of resources. Even if it's a colleague, if it's the SMA, whatever, you reach out. I like us to commit to our colleagues, to commit to that connection that will continue to foster between one another. Commit to attend meetings like this. Commit to, interact with one another. Build your own network. Have your small, network where you want to work together, where we can check on one another. Let's commit to understanding and supporting one another. And at this point, I would also like to flag. Commit to mentorship. Younger ones, younger physicians. There are some of us, that just come in and we don't even know what to do. We're struggling. And the younger ones can also commit to older ones. So how can I help in this situation? What can I support with? We need to commit to our colleagues. And the last part of our commitment that I want us to commit to is to commit to the healthcare system. When I say commit now, we need to commit to speak up, especially when there are issues that are not pleasant. We need to commit to participate in the conversations about the discourse of advancing the well-being of Black physicians, whether it's locally or otherwise. And I also think we need to commit to taking on leadership roles. Some of us will be tapped on the shoulder. Some of us, there will be opportunities that will present itself. It might not be lucrative, but it's important that we commit to it. And with the notion that we all need to remember, either ways, you're on the table. If you're not feasting, then you're on the menu. So it's better for us to commit to taking on those leadership responsibilities as they may present itself. Well, on that note, I will wrap it up. These are some of my references, and I would like to thank everyone. I don't know if there are any questions or we'll take it at the end. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much. We'll take the questions at the end. We want to wrap it up. We're trying to be cognizant of time. So please be on standby. So we're just going to go to our second presentation of the day. Thank you so much, Dr. Adebayo. We appreciate you. So while Dr. Etowa is getting her slides ready, let me just quickly introduce her. Dr. Josephine Etowa is a full professor and Canada Research Chair, Tier 1 in Advancing Black Women's Health at the University of Ottawa. Her research focuses on health inequities, racism in healthcare, and the health of Black Canadians, women, and girls using transformative approaches such as intersectionality and community-based participatory action research. Dr. Etowa is the founder of the Co-Create Lab, which has secured over $50 million in funding. She's received numerous national and international awards, including the Order of Ottawa in 2024, the Ron Draper Award for Health Promotion in 2024, and the Canadian Science Policy Center's Trailblazer Award in 2021. Dr. Jo Etowa has significantly contributed to global health through mentorship and research in Nigeria and has held leadership roles, including the co-chair of the Community Health Nurses National Standard Working Group. She was also appointed to the Royal Society of Canada's Health Task Force on COVID-19's impact on nursing. In fact, just in this month that just ended, she was the recipient of the King Charles III Coronation Medal. Congrats, Jo.
Thank you.
Jo is not just all of these things. She's my personal friend and my sister. So I'm glad to introduce her and welcome her to the podium. One of these days, we should have her in the CANPAD, the real deal, at one of our conferences. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Jo Etowa, all the way from Ottawa.
Thank you, Dr. Adebayo. I will start by also doing a land acknowledgement, given that, as you said, today is just a day after Black History Month. So I still consider this Black History Month event. So in keeping with the Indigenous protocol for building respectful relationships and grounding our work as Black Canadians, and as active participants in the national reconciliation process, I'd like to acknowledge that today I am situated at the ancestral land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, and that I extend my deep respect to all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, recognizing their invaluable contributions, past and present, to this land. I also acknowledge the continent of Africa as the cradle of humanity and I also honor the contribution of African, Caribbean, and Black people to the development of human civilization. I recognize that we are in the last quarter of the United Nations Decade for People of African Descent, under the themes of recognition, justice, and development. We take this opportunity to reflect on our current condition in this land called Canada, and we continue to work with our allies towards making long-term improvement to the lives of the diverse people in this shared land called Canada. So as I listened to my colleague, Dr. Adebayo, speak, I just thought we did not even talk with each other, but I could just see some of the actually shared. Can you see my PowerPoint? Is this still showing?
Yes.
But it's looking small on my screen. Let me see. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay.
The wine glass, it will make it full. You are not sharing a full screen.
Oh, okay. Is that bigger now?
No, it's not there now. You took it off.
I actually have it. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, my entire PowerPoint vanished. Just 1 minute, please. Trying to open it. I'm sorry. It was just sitting on my desktop and vanished. Can you see my PowerPoint now?
Yeah, it's excellent now.
Okay, good. Thank you. So I'm just delighted to actually be here today with you to talk about an important topic that I have been working on for years, just looking at the way racism impact on both the health of people of African descent, but also for those of us who work in the system, how it affects us in the way that my colleague described so well in the last presentation. So to set the scene, I just want to start by actually talking about numbers, because like you said, what are our strengths? Numbers, strength, strength in numbers. There's strength there, but there's also knowledge that we bring to the system so much. That is also power. Knowledge is power, right? And our numbers is also strength. So ACB communities, and I often use ACB communities to acknowledge the diversity within the Black community, because when we say Black Canadians, we're talking about Black people from the continent of Africa, Black people from the Caribbean, Black people who have lived in Western world for multiple generations, whether it's in the UK, in Australia, in the US, or Canada, and are born here. And so to be inclusive of all of that, we often say ACB people. We've lived in Canada for over 400 years. Historians trace the presence of Black people in Canada to 1606 when Matthew de Costa first arrived in Nova Scotia. And so when you come back to where we are now in 2021 census data, we represent 4.3% of the general population in Canada. This include individuals, again, like I said, whose ancestors have been in Canada for centuries, such as those in Nova Scotia. They often call themselves sometimes African Nova Scotians, and those who are children and grandchildren of immigrants and recent immigrants from countries in Africa and the Caribbean that I've mentioned. We originate from over 182 countries compared to 230 birthplaces for the general Canadian population. And so it's quite a diverse group from many countries. Compared to other racialized or ethnic groups, ACB people have experienced the fastest growth over the past 20 years in Canada, doubling the population from 2001. We were about 600 and something thousand. Now we're 1.5 million in 2021. And so the presence in our presence in Canada is increasing, but we continue to significantly be impacted by the legacy of the Atlantic slave trade and colonization. Slavery was a part of Canada for over 206 years, and its legacy remains with us. Anti-Black racism, a key legacy of slavery and colonization, is still alive and well in health and healthcare. Anti-Black racism manifests in employment discrimination, in healthcare provider bias, in poor representation in healthcare leadership, in lack of research and appropriate decision-making, in lack of culturally responsive services and education in housing, and so many other areas. And so when we hear of the burden of disease that Black people carry, we saw that during the COVID-19 pandemic. We constantly see that in various disease conditions, whether we're talking about fibroids among Black women, the type, the size, the intensity. And so it's so important for us who work in the system to ensure that even when we engage in research, we're not just measuring the things that happen, the physiological changes, the pathophysiology and other things happening in terms of diseases, that we're measuring the social conditions under which that happens, so that we can clearly map out the kinds of burnout you're talking about. How does it map out to the social environment, to our workplaces, so that we can actually have policies that not only monitors and track our disease burden, but the social environment that creates this disease burden. So given that context, Black physicians in Canada frequently face a range of challenges that stem from both overt and subtle forms of anti-Black racism. And why am I emphasizing the anti-Black? Because finally, after the pandemic and George Floyd's death, we now have a shared language. We can actually talk about racism. For years, some of us have talked and written about racism, published books on them, but it just was not well received. But at least now, even the government talks about racism and how it affects us. And we pull out anti-Black racism to highlight the fact that quite often the Black experience is always placed at the bottom. Even when we talk about BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, or even when we do diversity initiative in academic institutions and other areas, when it really gets to getting at the bottom of the issue, other people may move forward and in fact, even join in the discrimination against Black people. And so we must pay attention that anti-Black racism is like the bottom rung. And if they need to do something about racism, then we need to do something about anti-Black racism, because addressing anti-Black racism is addressing racism for all. It's just like saying we need to put sidewalks so people who have wheelchairs can actually have access to certain buildings. Well, when we put those sidewalks or put a wheelchair accessible pathways to our building, it's not only wheelchair people that benefit. Parents with young children in strollers benefit, other people benefit. And so for us, when we're talking about racism, the intervention must address anti-Black racism, the bottom piece, because when that is addressed, other people benefit. But quite often, they can address anti-other racism and not address the anti-Black racism. So we need to pay attention to that bigger system, a systemic structure that keeps us where we've been for so long. So these experiences of Black physicians is a reflection of a complex interplay between individual bias and systemic inequalities. So acknowledging these experiences of racism is a critical first step toward developing targeted strategies that promote a healthier, more inclusive healthcare environment for Black physicians. And so what we're doing today is so important to actually just have a conversation about what is going on in your workplaces. And so we're using this opportunity to validate your experiences of racism, name it. Just being able to name the problem. We can talk about the burnout, the individual level resilience, and the strategies we can take at the individual level, but it's bigger than any individual level intervention. Individually, we can get burnout too. And so we must look at that collective effort that the last speaker talked about, how we can come together and actually mobilize all the talent we have that we put in our work to do good work for patients. Because you know what, even our ethical standards as healthcare professionals tells us to not only do no harm to the patient, but to have a safe work environment that's not creating harm for us. And so it's a dual ethical dilemma here. Do I go there and harm myself because I'm going through this, but just save the patient? And well, you know, when we go to the airplane, they tell us put the mask on you first so you can survive. Because if you're feeling the way that was just described in the last presentation, are you truly going to be there for the patient when the compassion is gone? And so this is a great first step to moving forward in this journey. And so race is such a key element of what is going on. And so we must name it for what it is, because that's where the healing starts, when we can name it. And we know what makes race important, what makes race salient. Pure races in the sense of genetically homogeneous populations do not exist in human species today, nor is there any evidence that they have ever existed in the past. Biological differences between human beings reflect both hereditary factors and the influence of natural and social environment. In most cases, these differences are due to the interaction of both. And I cite the American Association of Physical Anthropology for this. So racism really is the status quo of society. And so what then makes race so important when we talk about Black people and as a race? The process of racialization. So we must name the process of racialization in what is going on. Even the government right now is changing their language. The whole idea of visible minority, you know what, we're only visible when they want to see us. But for the most part, when you're actually very visible, you're not visible anymore. You're not visible in leadership role. You're not even noticed at the workplace when you're the most visible. And so they're using more concept of racialized people, because it's the process of racialization that is creating this, what we're calling racism. And that's what makes race important. And so racialization is the process of being assigned a race with all of its subtle and not so subtle meanings, expectations, and assumptions. For example, when people, certain characteristics, traits, and attributes are viewed to be of a lesser worth or abnormal. It could be the accent we speak. I remember when I first got my first academic appointment many years ago at Dalhousie University, and I was teaching this particular course. And somebody said, in my first evaluation, somebody said, oh, well, that's something she's very knowledgeable, but you have to decode the accent. You know what I did after that? Every class, the beginning of the term, I tell my students, listen, you speak with an accent, you're actually so blessed that the university gave you me, because you're going to have people who speak with my accent at the hospital where you'll be working. In the many places you'll be working, you have people who speak with an accent. And so it's better for you to practice here and learn how you can try things in different ways. I said, yes, I speak with an accent and we all have an accent. But what do you do to make sure the other person can understand you? If you Canadians say Alberta, and I don't know what it is, and I would spell it out, try to understand. If I say Josephine Etowa, you don't understand what I mean by Etowa because you don't say T, I find a way to make you understand. What do you do to make sure that your patients who speak with accent, who may not understand your own accent, can understand you? And I'm telling you, for many years, that kind of comment didn't come back. But I think the last speaker also talked about us standing up for ourselves. Sometimes that is necessary. And so even our name, the sound of our name for generations, the name you have determined whether you'll be admitted into certain programs in university. People talked about that. There's studies to show that. Your clothing, your grooming, your diet, your belief, your practices, your place of origin, all are characteristics that are racialized. That's the process of racialization. Racism itself also involves reserving favor, simple things like favors and smiles to one own kind or class. So just being kind, being telling the best stories only to those people you feel need to hear it. Being your most charming self, or invitations to real intimacy. Some of the stories I've heard, even from what's going on even in Saskatchewan and other parts of the country, it really points to this. How many times do you get invited to that office party that's happening in people's home? How many times does your colleague call you aside to tell you that special program that is there now to build leadership skills that is free, or that funding that is somewhere there in your workplace that people are assessing to get special training and move ahead in leadership roles? Those are the kinds of favors we're talking about, process of racialization. So racism is a complex system of structuring opportunity and assigning value based on race that unfairly disadvantages some individuals and communities and unfairly advantages others. It occurs on different levels, including internalized, individual or interpersonal, institutional, systemic, and all of these are anchored by structural racism. Now I'll touch on each of that. Internalized racism is the acceptance by members of the stigmatized races of negative messages about their own abilities and intrinsic worth. It exists within us as individuals. How many times can you think about your own practice where you are taking care of a Black person and even that Black person doesn't quite respect you the way they would respect the white physician who is taking care of them? I'll give you an example. I remember in my practice, I'm a nurse and a midwife by background. I worked in labor and delivery unit for many years here in Canada. And I remember this particular day, I was working in a delivery unit and a Black family came in for care. I was assigned to take care of them. And as I was working with this family, this woman needed an intravenous infusion. As I went to gather my things to start the infusion, she became nervous and turned to her family and said, "Do you think she's a real registered nurse?" So you can imagine the pressure that puts. And I could hear the family saying, "Only registered nurses work in this unit. So she must be a registered nurse." But I point that to say, we have to prove ourselves constantly and prove ourselves even to other people that look like us. That's what internalized racism does. And so I came in there thinking, I must get this, like this IB at first attempt so she could know that I'm a re-registered nurse. But we put the pressure on ourselves to prove even to ourselves. And so it took getting it at first attempt for her now to say, oh, okay, she knows what she's doing. But that's what internalized racism, the lack of trust on one another, wanting to give the credit, even as we're talking about mentoring one another. You may go to your Black physician colleague to get advice, but when it comes to acknowledging it publicly, you give the credit to another person who is white so that I can look like, oh, I'm being mentored by this important person, not the one from your community. Interpersonal and racism, the expression of racism between individuals through discrimination, harassment, or slurs. This can happen at interpersonal level, including those that happen in the interaction between providers and the patients, but also one that happened between colleagues. Quite often we're comfortable to talk about discrimination and racism as it affects patients and patients' care, but we don't talk enough about what our colleagues do to us, what they say to us, that further marginalizes the person who is at the receiving end of those kinds of behavior. Institutionalized racism. These are discriminatory treatment unfair policies and practices, and inequitable opportunities and impacts within organizations and institutions based on that whole race. And then we talk about systemic racism. These are, again, discriminatory treatment, unfair laws, policies, and practices, and inequitable opportunities and impacts within whole system. So the whole system, the whole healthcare system, the whole education system, where we take our professional training, the banking system, the housing system, the legal system, the policing, talking of policing. These are all whole system impact. And then the structural racism that refers to the deep and compounding impact of racial bias among people across institutions, across systems, and in society, which in turn then shapes and mutually reinforces the patterns and experiences of the other forms of racism. And I just want to, again, highlight the difference between this systemic and structural, because quite often people just lump them together. So while structural racism and systemic racism are both pervasive and deeply embedded in laws, in policies, in practices, and established beliefs and attitudes that produce, condone, and perpetuate widespread unfair treatment of racialized people, they have different emphasis. The systemic racism emphasizes the involvement of whole system, again, political system, legal systems, including the structures that constitute the framework for such institutions and systems. But structural racism emphasizes the culture, the ideology, the ideological dimension, as well as the whole of the structure. Again, the policies and laws. So it's the scaffolding that holds the system. Sometimes I say the ligaments that connect this all together. And so even though we talk about it in structure, even individuals, if you have a senior person, like what's happening right now in the South, you have one person who has this belief and is at a leadership role, it can actually permeate through that structure of the system. This is not it. Yeah. So one example of this structural racism is color blindness. And I just like to get into some of these concepts so that even for us as Black people who are experiencing this are more aware of the concepts and how they play out in our everyday experiences. So color blindness is the belief that one should treat all persons equally without regard to their race. And so what it does, again, is one of those ideologies that anchors racism and microaggressions. It denies the negative racial experiences of people and invalidates their unique perspectives. It ignores everyday racism and examines only racism that are extreme, explicit, and horrific. But the ones that some people in my research have described it as that razor in the psychic of Black people that just keeps, giving you that cut every time you go out there and you're treated in those ways. They might be subtle, but those microaggressions is like a razor in your psychic, constantly cutting and getting at the soul of the human being. So white supremacy then is the belief that people with a white skin are superior and therefore should be dominant over other race. It's not only an attitude, it's also a way of thinking. The other concept in the structural piece is the othering, utilizing the power within the relationship of subordination and domination to put the other people as the other, and you, we, and they. And so I also like to, these are some concepts. Again, I cite here Saad's book, Me and White Supremacy. White apathy, because you see this. So it's a form of racial apathy, like that. We call it lazy answers and inactions, which attempts to dismiss the reality of racism on people's life. It often include comments like, we just need to get along. Naming things racist just strokes the division. So you may be talking about something and a colleague tells you, it's really sad that this is happening, you're talking about racism and a colleague at work tells you, it's really sad that this is happening, but it's not my problem. I wish I could help you with your cause around racism, but unfortunately, I'm just too busy right now. Unfortunately, I'm just too tired right now. Unfortunately, it's not on my priority for right now. Maybe when I'm clear a bit more and I have a bit more space for myself, I can make some time to come and help you out. Until then, all the best doing your anti-racism work. It's white apathy. White centering of white people, white values, white norms, and white feelings over everything and everyone else. This is a natural consequence of white supremacy, because if the ideology gets embedded in our system, in our being, if you unconsciously believe you are superior, then you will unconsciously believe that your world is the world that is superior, normal, right, and that it deserves to be at the center of everything. When I heard the last speaker talk about how he got into med school, excited, wanting to make a difference, feeling excited about the change or the difference he makes going to work. It's interesting because he really spoke to me. One of my earlier studies, I actually did a series of studies examining the work life of nurses in Canada at various social locations. I examined the work life of Black nurses. Then I did another study that examined the work life of Indigenous nurses. I did another study that examined the work life of other visible minority nurses, again, when we're still using that concept based on the Canada Employment Act of 1985. Is somebody asking a question? I heard sounds. No, keep going. Okay. Yeah. So that really resonated with the findings in that study, where people actually, one of the study, the key thread, it was a grounded theory method study, and the theory that organized most of the experiences of the Black nurses was surviving on the margins of a profession. They talked about coming into a profession, hoping to make a difference, getting excited. However, when you find yourself there, the journey to getting into the center of that profession, to getting into leadership, to just thriving like others, gets stalled by racism. So you find yourself on the margins. And in fact, some people actually fall off the margins if they cannot find the resources and the resilience to continue. And so this centering speaks to that. Another point that Dr. Adebayo pointed out was that great example he gave about having a conversation on the hallway and somebody saying they were animated and doing this. That's tone policing. Tone policing is the concept where Black people are asked to speak in tones, or other racialized people are asked to speak in tones that are considered acceptable to those of white privilege, or those with white privilege. They are the kinds of things, and he just illustrated, how can you expect people who don't even understand that we express emotion differently? People express excitement differently based on different cultures or different personalities, and that those are still acceptable ways of engaging, of moving your hands and being able to talk. So the tone policing, and I tell you, when you call it out, sometimes people can recognize. I've seen a situation where I see another Black person being tormented at a reception room, and I just gently walked over and said, so who has made you the tone police officer to really tell this person how they're supposed to speak? It didn't take long before that person left the reception desk quickly and sent somebody else to come up because he could no longer handle the situation because they'd been called out of what they were trying to do to put the other person down. So tone policing. Tokenism is another version in terms of how these structures and ideologies manifest in our everyday interactions. Because when we begin to notice it and call it out, it's part of solving the problem. Tokenism is literally get out of racism free card, tokenistic or symbolic effort to do something without providing real opportunities for growth and leadership. Again, the last speaker talked about people getting into leadership role. But sometimes getting into leadership role, you're set up to fail if they don't give you the resources. So you need to assess the situation and know that you're not just being put into a glass escalator to take you up and you drop off the edge of that glass escalator, that you're actually going and you will have resources to create real and meaningful change in the place where you find yourself. And then we have this concept too of white saviorism. They believe that people with white privilege who see themselves as superior in capability and intelligence have an obligation to save racialized people from their supposed inferiority and helplessness. The Tarzans of the world would come and save Africa and save us all when we can't, because we're not intelligent enough to save ourselves. The other piece that we often see for all of us who work in the system and those who engage in knowledge production is epistemic racism. This actually came from one of our recent study, and part of this study that Zeta led this particular paper. We did this during the pandemic or just before the pandemic hit. And again, it was looking at physicians, nurses, social workers, occupational therapists, and their experiences. And so one of the themes that came out of that is epistemic racism. And what is epistemology? The knowledge systems and rules about what we can know and how. So the ontology and epistemology of knowledge. What ways of knowing are considered valid? Who can be a legitimate and authoritative knower? Who can be that legitimate researcher? So these knowledge rules are often implicit and often tacitly racialized. In Canada, the voices and knowledge claims of white Western scholars, researchers, and professionals have long been privileged. We see that in research grants, who gets the big grants, that those things are changing. We're working through it. CIHR has been over the last 2 years consulting and developing an anti-racism strategy in terms of how grants are awarded, and even using different metrics to do that. But it's work in progress. And we still watching to see how that translates into real equity. So white Eurocentric ways of knowing and forms of knowledge are legitimized and granted authority, while others are rendered inferior. You may ask, where is the evidence? Quite often we don't even collect the data to show what we're now gathering that data to show. But look, even when you look at your own career pathway and those of your colleagues who graduated with you, are you at the same level? Are you invited, even when you're doing the research, are you invited to give those big keynotes around the world and placed in those positions? That is who is the recognized authority that is getting to those places. So epistemic racism can also mean certain knowers themselves are devalued, which is the racialization process. So building an inclusive healthcare environment requires that the knowledge claims upon which professional authority is granted be extended to all kinds of colors of knowers or researchers. We become more conscious of the opinions and attitude everyone brings into the workplace and the ways in which our mindsets affect our behaviors if we bring that diversity and inclusive workplace. And we also build an inclusive workplace where individual differences can be valued and each person should be included, respected, and fairly treated. And so I just want to bring it back. All those concepts about racism is real. It has real meaning in terms of the work you do as Black physicians. You encounter the subtle, everyday slights, the microaggression. Some may be repeatedly subjected to comments or questions that undermine their professional expertise, such as having their credentials or even knowledge implicitly questioned. And I'm sure many of you deal with these. Some examples were given that even though it wasn't credential, but there are questions that point to this. There are instances where Black medical doctors face even overt and racist remarks or behaviors from colleagues, administrators, or even patients. This can manifest as a dismissive attitude regarding their recommendations or decisions, or in some cases, patients expressing reluctance to be treated by a Black doctor. Even as a nurse, I've experienced some of those issues. I remember my first job in Canada. I was doing home care. I went to a patient home, and right at the door, he said, I opened this door and he said, "Leave, you do not speak English." I said, "No, I speak English." He said, "You don't understand, leave." And this patient was coming on a wheelchair to knock me off from the door. I was like, what? I told her, like, I didn't know what was going on. I ran downstairs to the commissioner and I said, this is what's happening. I was like trembling because this person was chasing me with a wheelchair. He just didn't believe that a Black person was coming to their home. It was in a big condominium complex. So I ran to the commissioner and they called the office and they literally said, you know that this person is so and so and it can help you get to this. And he said, I don't care. Just let her leave. I don't mind. They say you pay for her services. I don't care. I'll pay. That's when I knew that I could not do home care. So these experiences can get really bad and we need to do something about it. And I'm just happy that CANPAD is taking this initiative to really move on this, because a collective action is definitely the way to make more advances. So systemic and institutional racism, we see them through barriers to career advancement. Many Black medical doctors report difficulties in accessing leadership roles or recognition equivalent to their peers. The structural bias embedded in hiring practices, performance evaluation, and promotion processes can significantly hinder career progression. I'm sure you see that even in your own practice, and even just some of the comments that sometimes patients will write or even post online about your practice. You wonder, is that really about me they're talking about? You know, exclusion from networks and mentorship. I've talked about what this looks like. So with few role models or mentors who share similar experiences, Black physicians may feel isolated within predominantly white institutional settings. And this lack of representation or support contributes to a sense of isolation and can repress professional growth. So when we're talking about burnout, these different aspects of how racism plays out in our workplace, really does increase the chance of being burnout. So inequitable opportunities, disparities again in research funding, in professional development opportunities and recognition all create challenges for people to thrive in their workplace. So you, again, that need to prove, I'll just go back there, the need to prove oneself, to work harder, to obtain the same level of acknowledgement or opportunity as one's colleague, are all the issues we're talking about in terms of how race plays. So impact of racism on well-being and even your practice. I won't dwell on this because actually the last presenter really spoke to that issue. But we know that strong evidence that span across decades consistently point to race and racism as central in the health and well-being of racialized individuals, families, communities, and even nations across the world. Race and racism have deadly impact on the social determinants of health. And health inequities, as we see in the social determinants of health, combine to amplify systemic threats to the health of Black people. They do this through various pathways, whether it's just how we live and maintain well-being while dealing with the burden of racism, but also how socioeconomic issues associated with racism can continue to render racialized people like Black people vulnerable in terms of their physical and mental health. And again, the last speaker gave examples of that. There are a number of systematic reviews that have examined over 300 studies and can tell you the various ways in which the stressors we deal with because of racism can lead to mental health, increased drug use, different cardiovascular conditions, and different issues. Those links have been made. So I won't get into them. And so just continuing on the impact, the emotional and psychological toll, so the continuous exposure to racism, whether overt or covert, often result in this heightened stress and burnout and persistent sense of imposter syndrome, questioning yourself sometimes. And this burden not only affects the personal well-being, but also impacts on your clinical performance. And you know what, once that happens, that's what people would notice more. They would notice all the other things that have led you to that point. They would pick on that clinical performance. Patient care challenges. When racial bias affect workplace dynamics, it can inevitably influence patient interaction. So for example, the additional stress of combating racism might affect decision-making and communication and ultimately influence the quality of care that a physician is providing. When we think about reflecting on this in terms of our real-world everyday practices, some physicians find themselves in situations where they feel compelled to repeatedly validate their expertise, even in the face of clear professional accomplishment. You can be well accomplished, but you feel the need to prove yourself, to check, to make sure you're doing things right. And this creates that additional burden that is based on one's racial identity. When the last speaker started his presentation, he talked about all the usual stressors that people would get with the nice image of somebody just sitting on the hallway that doctors face on their daily practice, long hours and all that. And on top of that, you come and add the burden of your racial identity. It just further compounds the issue. And so advocacy is a key word here that he's talked about. We have to galvanize effort for systemic reforms because individual effort alone will not do that. And so talking about systemic response, I just wanted to take us to the kinds of response that are more sustained in terms of long term. So what are the systemic barriers that need to be removed in your own organization? And how can those barriers be removed? I like this image because it just helps us to see how the concept of equality and equity and systemic barriers removal actually plays out. So that as we think about interventions, even interventions that CANPAD is engaging in, we can think if those can be sustainable in the long run. So the evidence that underscore this critical need to change, it needs to be ingrained in inequities and implemented in terms of meaningful and sustainable change. Removing structural barriers call for foundational social justice and equity principles and strategies at the system level. So if we focus on equality, the first image there, notice that equality means that everyone is given the same support without considering what each person needs to succeed. The need of the Black physician may not be exactly the same as the need of his white counterpart because they are not on a play level field. So you can see here, these people watching the game, the little man that's given the same level of stool as the other cannot see. In fact, two people on this side can't see. If we move to equity, again, this time equity means everyone is given the support they need to succeed. Again, the focus here is still individuals. Some people giving scholarship, some people giving different tools they need to succeed, giving mentors. But you can see again, yes, everyone can see now, but that's not what we're looking for. Because you know what? That tool may not be there tomorrow. What we're looking for is the whole fence to be removed, removing barriers, remove the fence completely so nobody needs a stool. Nobody needs special support at the individual level. By addressing the cause of the inequity and removing systemic barriers, each person can now succeed without the need for support. And that's what systemic interventions should do. Always look upstream. What is bringing people down to this level of burnout? We can't be dealing with the burnout. We need to go upstream and prevent it by removing whatever that fence, whatever that barrier or obstruction is that is creating the burnout that we heard about in the last presentation. I'd like to use this model, iceberg model again, to illustrate the same point, that in order for us to have intervention long-term, we need interventions that address the multiple levels of racism we just talked about. We need interventions that address what's happening, because when you see, so while behavioral approaches and insights are necessary to change individual thinking and behavior, systemic or system level thinking is necessary to change the structural determinants of inequities. And in this iceberg model, what it does is show us that what we're seeing on the surface of the water is just a small piece of the real problem that's happening underneath the surface of this water. So the little pointed end of the ice that is here, we can see signs like microaggressions, internalized oppression or racism, invalidation, dismissal, those discriminatory experiences you have or stereotypes about people. But if we just deal with that at the individual, oh, what just happened? You documented, you reported, you did those things you can do at the individual level. But when you go underneath, you will see that we have systems that are perpetuating and modeling what's showing up above. Racist policies and practices, people don't talk about these issues. So white supremacy, those things are happening at the institutional level. But even more so, they are anchored in those ideologies deep down in the darker side of the ice, of the water there, you can see the systemic and structural level. That is the root of the problem. What are the attitudes, the beliefs, the morals, the expectations, and the values that keep the system in place? The othering, the white supremacy, the color blindness, the white centric, the white apathy, those things, the social construction of race and race product. They're deep down. And so when we're designing intervention, our framework needs to capture this deep-rooted aspect that keeps the attitude or the things you're seeing on the surface at the individual level, at the interpersonal level going, because dealing with the top alone would not address it. Our framework must get down there. So I just want to say, in terms of addressing this, you can see there's still individual level intervention. And again, the last presentation really touched on this individual level interventions. Being aware and informed, you must educate yourself. And it's great. That's part of what we're doing today. That's why I just took the time to go through some of those concepts. Cultural humility is a personal and introspective approach where individuals strive to understand and address cultural dynamics that respect Black culture, history, and lived experience. And again, I thought this is very befitting too to have this during Black History Month, because one might say, what does Black culture have to do with this? The more we promote even the culture with our own children, with the people around us, the more people become more aware of who we are as Black people and can respect our full identity. As we bring that to the workplace, to the office, people can respect that. So it's important for us to understand our own culture and the strength in that. We need to document and report racist incidents. We need to create safe spaces for dialogue. So be part of resource group that have open conversations about race, identity, and experience in the workplace. Mentorship programs or these resource groups are an important way to do that. Again, peer support, I cannot overemphasize, is an important part of tackling racism. Being part of groups like what you have here, I think is wonderful, whether it's both within your own institution or through professional organizations, like CANPAD, Black Physicians of Canada, and their local chapters. The last presenter also talked about self-care practices, whether it's mindfulness, taking your breaks and your vacations. That is so important. And also leveraging your power. You do have power, leveraging that power to advocate for change. The fight against racism is never an individual journey. It's a collective journey. And we need to engage in that, or you need to engage in that as a collective journey. And so it's interesting, both of us talk about the concept of resilience, but I'm happy that I focus on resilience as a collective strength. So you can only go so much with individual level resilience. And we see that in our community. You go back to school, you go do something else, we're so resilient, but at some point we need to, you get burnout, you get other conditions as a result of always striving to transcend the adversity you're constantly facing. So the resilience of ACB healthcare professionals like yourself has been cornerstone of their enduring contributions to Canadian and other Western society. Their ongoing effort to overcome systemic barriers not only highlight their strength, but also pave the way for more inclusive and equitable healthcare system. So while individual resilience, which focuses on personal coping and recovery, are necessary, there is a need for collective resilience. This leverages the power of community solidarity, shared cultural identity, shared experiences, and mutual support to withstand and recover from the adversity of racism. For ACB people, collective resilience often emerges through shared historical experiences and communal effort to challenge systemic inequities. And so again, building from this, and I just highlighted some of the key concepts here in terms of collective resilience. Black community can foster this collective identity, not only survive adversity, but transform it into a source of strength and empowerment through community building, cultural affirmation, collective healing, economic empowerment, and educational initiative. And I'll just take each one of these briefly. So what do I mean when I'm talking about community building and networking? We want to establish, whether it's community, local support group, online networks like what you have already, to continue to share experiences. You want to encourage partnership with your Black-led organization. How do you support one another? How do you not allow this internalized racism to stop you from really trusting and collaborating with another physician practice? Mentorship program, again, creating and connecting with leaders, with established figures within the community, and promoting skill sharing and mutual support for one another is an important part on how you build solidarity to address this. Cultural affirmation and celebration, cultural programming, organize events, workshops like this, and festivals that celebrate Black history, Black art, Black music, Black tradition, Black achievement. And you want to reinforce a strong, positive communal identity, because that not only builds empowerment within the community, but it also helps others to see the positives. Storytelling and oral history also preserve and share narrative of resilience, of struggle, of triumph, which can empower community members and offer models of overcoming the adversity that comes with this marginalization. Then collective healing practices, again, in addition to taking those steps that the last speaker talked about, having your breaks, your vacation, you also need to facilitate safe spaces where you can communicate with other people and share experiences. Sometimes we learn from our collective trauma and build emotional solidarity because we see how some other people maybe have coped with it. Culturally informed mental health resources to promote mental health services that are attuned to the unique experiences of Black communities, including group therapy and community-led wellness initiative. Like Dr. Adebayo said at the beginning of this is part of therapy. We're having some group therapy today, even if it's just learning about the ideas and concepts and how this racism plays out in our everyday lives. Then fostering collective resilience in, again, Black communities, the economic and political empowerment, the support for Black-owned businesses, advocacy, I can't say enough about that, encourage participation in political processes. We have to be politically savvy. Again, the last speaker really emphasized the need for us not just to focus on our technical expertise at work, but for us to be engaged in terms of the civic participation, right? And to understand what's happening in our environment, to become politically savvy, know how to reach different people in our riding. When this is happening to you at work, it's affecting you even in your home place. So we need to be able to share some of that time instead of just spending it all doing our clinical practice and being clinicians or researchers and getting that technical expertise. We need to have the social connections to create the change we want to see as well. So we need to join in community organizing and social justice movement to drive systemic change and policy reform, because in order for us to have the safe work environment we're looking for, we need to drive systemic change. We need to influence those who make the policies around those healthcare systems, those institutions that are marginalizing us. And so we can't be out of the arena where the decisions are made. Educational empowerment, workshops and skill building sections to offer or to equip us with the tools for leadership and for the advocacy we're talking about. And of course, community-led research and dialogue. We need to be involved in the research and policy discussion to ensure that our voices and experiences directly inform the strategies for change. Somebody said, I think the last speaker again said, who is making the decision? who is making the plan for building resilience in the system if you, the physician that is affected, is not there? Nothing about us is for us. If you're not part of it, then it's not for you, because they don't understand your issues the way you understand it. So Black History Month, I just want to add that best practices for supporting Black physicians include inclusive leadership, focus on leadership that actively advocates the inclusion of Black physicians, not only through words, but also through actions, such as inclusive hiring and transparent career advancement opportunities provided for them. And that we not only celebrate Black history in February, that February still marks Black History Month, but we have initiatives that allow for celebration of Black culture, history, and contribution throughout the year. And then we also have our healthcare organization. They need to play a role in fixing the problem. We come to look at racism as a problem that we Black people will solve, that you as Black physicians will solve. Ethically, the duty to provide care and the duty to maintain a safe work environment are not mutually exclusive. They are interdependent. Racism undermines both by affecting provider well-being, but also affecting patient outcome. Addressing racism proactively through policy, through training, through support ensures that healthcare professionals are not forced to choose between their own safety and their commitment to patient. This is necessary for the Canadian healthcare system to uphold both ethical imperative, which fosters an environment where every provider is empowered to deliver the best possible care. And so healthcare institutions have roles to play by implementing changes to create a more inclusive and equitable environment that not only addresses anti-Black racism, but also leverages the diverse talent and perspective of its workforce to enhance overall effectiveness and public trust. Institutional policies and programs to improve EDI in healthcare and ensure that Black physicians can play a role in shaping those policies. It's very important. Cultural responsiveness, in this case, is different from humility that happens at the individual level. Here, you're actually actively adapting practices, policies, and systems to better align with and respect cultural differences and to foster a more inclusive environment that respects Black culture, history, and lived experiences. The other piece that institutions need to do is accountability and monitoring of progress. Data collection and research on Black medical doctors' experiences with a focus on creating transparent pathways for measuring progress in EDI and workplace well-being are central to the work of addressing racism. So everyone has a role to play. We play our individual role. Our communities work together through collective resilience. Organizations need to play their own role in instituting and in monitoring the policy they create. And then at a systemic level, I'm almost done. In Canada, addressing racism against Black healthcare professionals involve a combination of anti-discrimination policies, anti-racism policy, and regulatory policies or bodies that oversee professional conduct. And so, in addition to those steps that we've taken, we can also go as far as going to the law. Canada has robust anti-racism laws that apply to various sectors, including healthcare, with a focus on protecting individuals from racism, including against Black healthcare professionals. So we have Canadian Charter of Rights. So if it becomes too much for the individual, then our collective effort, the organizations can actually link us to the resources such as this, whether it's the Canadian Human Rights Act, the provincial and territorial human rights code. They all help us to tackle systemic racism. And we have policies at both the federal and provincial levels that are aimed at fostering inclusivity and addressing racial discrimination in healthcare and other systems. The final piece here is the regulatory body. They also have a role. Everyone has a role to play in addressing this issue. So regulatory bodies in Canada are responsible for ensuring that healthcare professionals adhere to ethical standards, and they also have a role in addressing discrimination and racism in the workplace. So again, our standards include do no harms to patients or those in our care, but it also includes us working in a safe environment. So those are two ethical standards that we can hold our regulatory body to come in and act. If I'm not safe to be there, how do you expect me to safely do no harm or take care of the patient in a way that they need to be careful? So College of Physicians and Surgeons, we have that. The Canadian Medical Association, while not a regulatory body, CMA advocates for anti-racism policies and had called for changes to address systemic racism in healthcare sector. It has been involved in initiatives to support Black healthcare professionals and improve racial equity in healthcare. Then the Human Rights Tribunals also is another platform that will help address this issue. So in conclusion, there is a need for all healthcare organizations and educational programs to commit to fostering an environment that not only supports Black medical doctors, but also celebrates their contribution and helps them thrive within their profession. Developing a healthier, more resilient workforce is a collective effort requiring the support and commitment of all levels of healthcare and educational system, as well as professional organizations. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you. I have some references and some resources that people can use. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very, very, very much, Joe. We truly, truly appreciate you helping us to navigate that complex topic. Maybe a round of applause to both of our speakers, both Dr. Adebayo and Dr. Etowa. You know, virtual clap.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Nnamdi Ndubuka, past president of CANPAD and current president of Black Physicians of Canada, who's going to help us navigate the question session. Dr. Nnamdi, are you there?
Yes, I am, Dr. Adebayo.
Okay, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for the presentation. We'd like to appreciate Dr. Adebayo and Professor Etowa for the excellent presentation this morning. I'd like to draw your attention to the chat box. There have been very interesting comments as well as questions. So I would pick the questions, and the first one will be from Dr. Kinjobi, and this is for both speakers. I know we are over time that was allotted for this event, so just want to crave the indulgence of our participants today. I know there might be other things that we've scheduled to do this Saturday morning, but if you don't mind, please give us just a few more minutes, because I feel that the questions that have been asked and that will be asked from those that have their hands up on the screen will be quite important to zoom into some of the things that have been said today. And I do agree with the comments around this event being also therapeutic for us. It is our space to encourage ourselves. So to both speakers, Dr. Kinjobi is asking, what tangible and intentional approach can we take to address internalized racism? So it seems we often neglect to support ourselves for the mirage of wanting acceptability from our oppressors. So what are your thoughts on this? Just if you can make it just 1 minute each, please. So let's start with Dr. Adebayo.
Right. Thank you very much. And I think that's a very important question. As we all can tell, even from the conversation that we've had this morning, racism in itself is a very sensitive topic. It can be uncomfortable, you know, to have most times, and I can see where, you know, at sometimes you just want to please and just want to go in peace, you know, like I bother nobody, so you know I can brush it off. But I think I'll piggyback from some of Dr. Etowa's comments, you know, talking about dialogue. I think that's the first place where we want to start from. We want to create that safe space, like she said. Then, I mean, that also comes with some, needs some navigation in terms of the practical steps. I think one of the things is to get equipped with the conversation so that you can normalize discussing racism if you are identifying it. You want to get equipped in terms of education. You want to get equipped in terms of having collegial conversations, even amongst ourselves as Black physicians, you know, sharing our experiences. You'll be surprised. I mean, I was at a place just yesterday and a gentleman walked to both, to myself and the other colleague, said, "Are you the security guys here?"
Mm-hmm.
Come on. I said, "Are you the security?" Well, I mean, the other gentleman said, "Oh, you know what?" Was responding. I said, we need to have these conversations. I mean, he felt, you know, but, you know, that's how they do, you know. No, let's have that conversation. It's okay. I'm not being aggressive about it. I think it's getting ourselves equipped with the information to feel comfortable. And this is something like many other things that we get with practice and we get more comfortable with. Yeah. I think the other thing is, you know, engagement and advocacy. I mean, and I piggyback from the event of, you know, the death of George Floyd. I say that many people had died, many Black men had died in the United States before George Floyd. But for some reason, we see how strategic advocacy works. People educated the public. Somebody took a picture to say, look, people should be aware. The public should be aware. The public got aware. There was another level in which, you know, there's influencers coming on board. That's another strategic advocacy. To the extent that things get to decision makers, whereby it can now be legislated to make sure that there are EDI principles, you know. Anyways, where I'm going to with that is, you know, there are multi-levels to it in terms of the practical approaches. Education is one thing, feeling comfortable about it, getting engaged and collectively advocating is another thing. Thank you.
And I'll just add briefly to what he already just articulated very well. I think we also actively need to have interventions that, like the mentorship program we talk about, so that our younger physicians can actually learn from the senior established physicians and know that, you know what, I can trust him, I can trust her, she can help me in this way. Instead of always thinking that I'm going to go trust somebody outside my community because they have my back, because they don't have your back. And if we can do some of those strategies that actually show that, you know what, somebody has your back here, no matter what, maybe we'll begin to trust one another more. And that trust will lead to us believing that, yeah, she's just as good. And the other piece is that celebration of Black excellence, of Black achievement. We have to take delight in celebrating ourselves. Find time from your busy schedule to nominate somebody in this organization for the good work they've been doing, so they get this award, and the young ones coming in say, wow, that's a Nigerian doctor that just did that. Then they can come to you. So I think that's part of how we can deal with those internalized racism, in addition to the other points. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Prof, Do you mind stop sharing your screen so that we can at least see?
I'm sharing screen. Oh, sorry.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. That's wonderful. Just want to see the big
Okay.
picture here
Did
for
I
a moment.
stop now?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
that's perfect. Thank you so much for those responses. Thank you. And we'll go to Dr. Laoshebikong, and then we'll take the next question from the chat box. Dr. Laoshogo, please, you can unmute yourself.
Good evening from Motherland. Thank you, CANPAD Saskatchewan, for this session. And it's nice to see 104, 105 people online listening, and this is massive. We talk so much about cultural humility, cultural sensitivity, cultural competence. When it comes to addressing systemic racism. And one of the questions that's been bothering me that I'd like to put to the two speakers is, what is our role while we are integrating into this society? What is our role in, with respect to cultural competency, cultural sensitivity, in understanding the ways things are done here, engaging with how things are done here? There's this old saying that do in Rome as it is done by the Romans, something like that. Without, where is the borderline? Where is the boundary between showcasing your own culture and understanding the culture that you are currently living in? So I would just leave it at that, if that's clear. Thank you. Did you hear me?
Yes. I hear. Yeah. Do you want to go first, or you want me to go first? You can go, Gbenga.
You can go ahead.
Okay.
I had the first.
So the concept of cultural competence and cultural sensitivity, I see them as a part of how we navigate the system. So when you talk about our culture we bring in, everyone came here and brought culture. And whether you arrive today and the person that arrived from Europe, even their accent is seen as this exotic accent. It's not like the one that somebody from Africa came with, where you arrive and your even your accent is seen as a problem people cannot understand, but the other one is kind of something people want to hear. So I don't see culture that you come in with culture to the Canadian system, and how do you learn the other culture? Because some of our children have been here for even 2 generations, and the culture they know is this. But what we're talking about is racism, and is how the skin, the hair texture has led to racialization. And so, yes, I do agree with you that we need to learn the Canadian way of being. The rules, we follow the rules. But in addition, what I think I thought the focus of this, yes, we touched on culture as part of our collective identity, but the focus is race and racialization and what that creates. And we should give that the attention that I think it needs. I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, and if I can pick, add to that, I hear that question about that sensitivity and doing things the way it's done here. I mean, 2 concepts come to mind, which is that of assimilation, cultural assimilation, and culturalization. We know that at the end of the day, even though the minority culture might need to change, one might need to adapt and understand the new culture where I'm finding myself as an immigrant. At the same time, it's also the responsibility of the dominant culture to understand that the social terrain is changing.
Yeah.
It's also the responsibility of the dominant culture to understand the culture of the immigrant population. So it's a two-way street is the way I would like to put it. And also to speak to the acculturization, you know, even though the minority culture might need to understand and make some changes, it doesn't mean they have to forget where they're coming from and their own roots, you know, like Dr. Etowa said. I think that it's all part of that understanding and acceptance on both parties, on both cultures rather, you know, that I think is the key here to try to help with the racism conversation in itself. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much once again for those the question and the response. I think we are learning quite a bit in terms of how to adopt some of those concepts to the work that we do. I'll read out the next question here from Dr. Onaolakbo. That's she's curious to know, you know, talking about how racial discrimination could be recognized. Oftentimes, these are very subtle. Sometimes they're overt. How could you expand a little bit more on how this group can recognize the act of racial discrimination? Maybe we'll start with Dr. Adebayo first, and then we'll go to
Okay, sure.
Right. I mean, I'll just say this. If it doesn't smell right, it doesn't look right, it doesn't feel right, more likely than not, it is not right. You know, there are experiences that we all go through that makes us uncomfortable. There are experiences that make us feel like, what's that about? You know, you see that oftentimes if you want to dig deeper into it, there is something underlying it. There can be, and here I like to also add that sometimes the perpetrators of racism might be intentional or not even knowing it. And I think that's where what the question, it might be, if it's overt, it's right there. But sometimes the problem is when the microaggression, I try to respond, I speak to it. For example, I've been asked, so where do you come from, for example? Oh, I'm from Prince Albert. So you get the message, you know, oh, where did you come from originally? Oh, I'm proud of my roots. If that's what you're asking, I'm from Nigeria. I'm proudly Nigerian. Where are you from? I mean, those are some things that maybe because over time, by the time you get it, oftentimes, I mean, sometimes if you can identify it, I think that's good. The other thing I say is, you know, I think education is also something, you know, when we educate ourselves about it, like this kind of forum, I'm sure, I mean, I've attended quite a number of, I mean, fora where you talk about some things and you're just like, oh, I didn't realize, I experienced that, but I didn't realize. So education is one piece that I would also point out there. But again, you know, if it doesn't look right, it doesn't feel right, more likely than not, it's not right. Thank you.
Yes, and just to add to that point, yes, education is key, and I do really agree with you. If it doesn't feel right, point it out, because sometimes it's unintentional and the person actually doing it does not know that they're creating the harm. But racism is not about whether it's intentional or not, but it's the harm it does to the person who is at the receiving end. I want to just use this 1 minute to give one example to tie into yours. I remember one day walking down the hall of, I was a graduate student, and I had 2 white students walking with me through the hallway, and the security person pulls me as we were just walking from one end, I think dentistry to the other building at the university, and the person just pulled me out of the three people walking. And I turned and I said, what's going on? The other two continued the conversation and went to the student room. They didn't notice. When I got there the next day, I told them, did you notice what happened? That I was pulled aside. You were not pulled. They told me to show my ID. I'm still in a building and I'm showing my ID. So I went to give a talk to a class of 200 students the next year. And I gave that example. One student came crying to me. No, it wasn't that. I come from a poor family. My mother is poor. And this, I said, but what has that got to do with what happened to me? He said, no, it's just that you didn't look familiar. I said, see, I didn't look familiar. I have been working at that university for like 5 years. This person moved from Calgary to Nova Scotia. This one came from here. They're just first year students and they look familiar. And I didn't look familiar. And I've been teaching at that place and I was pulled. So you can analyze this at different level, but you need to pull, confront it when it happens, because you're educating that person and educating yourself as well. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. I believe it does. And there are additional comments as well in the chat box. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And I encourage participants to check the comments there and also give thumbs up. And before I hand over back to Dr. Adetola, I just wanted to highlight very quickly, a lot has been said here about resilience and leveraging the powers that we have. And one thing practically that I know would be important for each and every one of us to do is to understand the concept of allyship and how that impacts us. So we all need to intentionally identify who are our allies, those early adopters, those who have gotten it, those who understand where the rocks are in our shoes and are ready to stand with us. If we intentionally identify them, then they can help us to elevate the voice. We're seeing what is happening down south. If you have somebody who understands it, then things can go very quickly. And that's an example of how allyship can help us to advance the cause. And I also want to comment that oftentimes we talk about racism. But I think we need to be intentional also to talk about the anti-Black specific racism, because that is really what we're talking about. Yes, we could come under the umbrella of racism, but we need to be specific. It's anti-Black racism. There is anti-Indigenous racism. Yes, we get it, but within our own space, we shouldn't sweep everything under the umbrella of anti-racism. And that's one thing I wanted to highlight for what has been said so far. So collectively, I think there is opportunity for us to all work together. Days are gone when it's all about me, myself, and I in my shop. The African proverb, which I always want to bring to the fore, is if you want to go fast, then go alone. But if you want to go far, then you go together. So as we move along, let's check on one another. Let's hold one another's hand and walk the journey, because some are going through very difficult moments. They require to be checked and require to be carried along. And I'd like to thank the presenters today for the excellent job that they've done, recognizing that there are people here who have very, very horrible experience and are continuing to move on. And we hope that the objective of the session today, in terms of its therapeutic nature, would have been achieved. Thank you. I will hand back to Dr. Adetola.
Thank you so much, everyone. The chat forum is also very interesting. Dr. Olakomi has assured me that this will not be the first and the last of this. So hopefully there will be an additional sessions. I'm not saying one, I'm not saying two, on this kind of topics. Fortunately, we have the CME director also in our province here. And the hope is that we'll be able to carry our friends in the other provinces along with this. I'm happy at the number we have, but we have hundreds of Nigerian doctors in this country, and we don't want this to just be an SK thing. Yeah, we're the ones who know where the shoe is pinching. Oh, is that the right word? Something like along that line. Now, just a few things. We also need to play to our strengths. That's very important. I checked. I think we have about 20 psychiatrists, for instance, in the city where I live, and I was counting. Of that 20, I think about 13 or 14 are Nigerians. Psychiatrists too. I'm just talking psychiatrists. 13 or 14 out of 20 are Nigerians. Now, what I'm saying is this. If somebody is going through something, I think part of it is let's cry out, let's shout out, so that we can at least get help for one another. I hope you get the point. That came true in what Professor Etowa and Dr. Adebayo said. I don't know if they didn't say it directly, but it did come out, if you listen attentively. And that's just one aspect. There are many other aspects. The point is, let's cry out. Let's not suffer alone. Let's not suffer in silence. And Dr. Adebayo said he'll be sharing the CMA thing about resilience and all of that. Let's use every available tool. I mean, I don't want to go over here all the things that we have seen. It's in our charts, both especially on the Saskatchewan WhatsApp. The leadership is working on a number of strategies which will be informing you about in due course. And so please stay tuned and let's participate. And we don't have a monopoly of how to navigate some of these things we're going through. So we'll appreciate suggestion from you guys too, and even if you're not part of Saskatchewan, and you know something, please pass it through the CANPAD leadership and it will get to us. We truly, truly appreciate all of you. I don't know if there's something I've said, I should say that I haven't said. Apart from that, Dr. Lau Shebikon, yes, yeah, even though you're in Nigeria, I beg say something.
Yes.
Don't leave me hanging here. You hear me say something, I beg.
Sorry?
I said say something.
Oh no. Other than again, what a wonderful event, and wonderful speakers, very interesting, very engaging, very educating, and very illuminating. I feel a lot more excited to take on racism issues within our society, and I hope that this has put a little bit of a boost in the rest of us as well to join in this fight. It is a long-term fight, and it is not. As we deal with one case, we know that other cases will surface, but let's not get discouraged. Let us continue to advocate for each other and for this cause. And advocacy should cut across the barriers of a profession. We have been blessed with so much knowledge coming from a professor with a nursing background, and I have learned a lot. And again, I doff my hat to Prof Etowa for her wealth of experience and her interest in this topic. And my brother Gbenga too. I missed your talk. I was in a no reception zone. As a matter of fact, I was in in a funeral party. I was eating abula, and when this started, so when I washed my hands, I joined. So I hope to listen to your recording because I've not heard you speak formally. But from the way you answered the questions, I know that there's a lot of information there for me to learn from. So thank you, the organizers, CANPAD CME director, thank you very much. And everyone participating from across the country, thank you. This is the beginning of Black History Month with the S. So the beginning of Black History Month, not the end of Black History Month. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Yemi. Yemi is, for those of you who may not know, was ex-president, I think 2 or 3 cycles ago, and he's away in Nigeria. So now we're rounding up. Please, that Professor Akimbi's 2-minute CBC video, you may say, oh, I'm not in the expo, I don't know what to do, whatever. Even by just sharing it, you are already helping someone to be aware of what's going on. Okay, so so that thing that was went viral, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, we encourage you. You know, we didn't make it, we didn't instigate it. They interviewed him, and it's gone viral, and that's just an index of what's going on. And then, of course, we know the story 3-4 years ago of Dr. Bayon. That was posted on the College of Surgeons and Physicians of Canada. It went up, I think within 24 hours, they got such blowback, and they actually removed it. But of course, you know, the cat has been let out of the bag, and on and on. We want to bring this to a close. We want to once again thank Dr. Gbenga Adebayo. We want to appreciate Professor Joe Etowa. Dr. Lakomi put in a massive shift behind you know, the curtains. Many of you don't see what he's been doing, but he's been the guy. I'm glad to be the happy face that everybody sees. Everybody says, I know what you want us to do. Sir, this one, I like that, you know. Okay, I suppose being a past president of CANPAD helps, but I just want to let you know that I'm just the face. Dr. Nnamdi Ndubuka, Shade Onolakpo, Dr. Kazim, there are so many people, Dr. Hope, these are the people who know in the leadership of the CANPAD SK who are doing a lot of runarounds. There are many people I'm going to get into trouble with right now, but now I'm having a senior moment. Please, all of you, I appreciate you. Forgive me if I don't mention your name. A lot of people have done so well for us. Some people suggested one name or the other, but we thank God for where we are today. But like I said, Dr. A.G. Ahmed is not here right now. He has to be at some other thing, but we appreciate every single one, and we're doing a lot of work in the background that just to help the situation we have found ourselves. And please stay tuned. We want to bring this to a close. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
By the way, we're going to make this, sorry, one more thing. We're going to make this available, I think YouTube format. Okay, Dr. Olakwame can give you more information about
Thank you, everyone. People has been asking me for the record of this seminar. It's a very powerful one. I want to appreciate Professor Etowa. You know what? The notice we gave her, I can tell you, was quite short. It's just less than a month. But to my friend, Dr. Gbenga Adebayo, it was just a phone call last Monday, this Monday, right? Because I was at the crossroad, because, you know, people were trying to bring in, they had to travel. I just called him. I said, Gbenga, I know you can do this. Why am I suffering myself looking for people to do this? He said, yes, just send me the topic. This is less than a week preparation. A lot of jazz hands to Gbenga. Thank you. I've been with you for years. I know what you are capable of doing. This is just the beginning. And our CANPAD at the national level will see more of you. Prof, we can call you anytime to come back. CANPAD is your home, and we're going to do this more and more. And one of the area highlighted for the forthcoming conference is CANPAD physician physical awareness and financial awareness. And one of the topics on ground presently is physician burnout. And one of our doctors in Alberta is taking care of that. We have a lot of interesting topics coming up this conference. Please be there. Register. The accommodation link is on. Book your accommodations and please register for the CME. It's going to be powerful. Another session of this kind is coming up before end of the year, and we need all your help and support. I appreciate what everybody has done, all the executive, the president, the past president. I have come BPC president here and the vice president. Dr. Somto is part of us too as one of the SK CANPAD leader. Thank you for all you do. And we'll call it end of the day today. And the record will be on the website. And Dr. Adetola will also make a YouTube for us. Thank you. God bless.